Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake meeting of council held June the 20th, 2017. Before we start, we'll have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Before we start the formal part of the meeting, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the new Chief Administrative Officer for the Town of Kirkland Lake, Mr. Peter Augustus. And Peter comes to us from the city of Guelph. Peter comes to us also with some several years of experience in municipal operations, as well as certainly very high academic credentials, and here for a day or two looking for residents. And Peter, we just wanted to quickly welcome you to our community formally, and we look forward certainly to your return in August when you'll sit in this chair here. It's a little warmer than that chair, as you'll find.
I kind of like this chair.
Yeah, as you find, but certainly we wanted to welcome you to our community, and if you wanted just to say.
Sure, I'm glad to be here. Make the trip up last night. Stuck in traffic, of course, down by my neck of the woods, just outside of Guelph. But the rest of the ride was good. I'm looking forward to coming up here later this summer. Met some of the staff so far. Been just doing the rounds a bit. But the main focus today is to kind of get a place to rent and house to place to stay. So don't want to get too involved with town business yet, but looking forward to it. And so far, the hospitality, the northeastern Ontario hospitality has been wonderful. So
good.
Thank you.
That's great to hear. And again, we look forward to your return to our community on a full-time basis. Perfect. And thank you very much for coming up. Okay, we have petitions, and we have the approval of the agenda, please.
It's moved by Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that Council approves the agenda for its regular meeting of June 20th, 2017 as presented.
All in favor? Carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? None declared. Petitions and delegations. We have Ray Zellernick? Close?
Close enough.
Okay. From Canadian Malartic. So again, welcome back, and here to do a presentation on behalf of the mine.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. And a pleasure to be back in council chambers and to address council members and your worship. It's my third time sitting in this particular seat to bring you up to speed with where we're at as Canadian Malartic with our projects. And in some ways, we've made some wonderful progress. In other ways, as we'll talk a little bit later on in this presentation, we've had a few minor setbacks, but it's to be expected. Again, as a reminder, Canadian Malartic Corporation is essentially a holding company, 50-50 of Agnico Eagle and Yamana Gold. The only thing that Canadian Malartic Corporation, of which I'm an employee, does is exploration. That corporation basically is the one that operates here in Ontario and in Kirkland Lake in the area. Canadian Malartic Partnership is the operating arm of Agnico Eagle and Yamana Gold, and essentially that's the mine site over in Malartic itself, the open pit over there. Which, by the way, is still the largest single open pit in Canada, North America. Well, not quite North America, but we're working hard to make it so. And we have Canadian Malartic itself has 3 operating projects. We have Hammond Reef out in northeast Ontario, just past Lakehead, Kirkland Lake itself, and the Malartic mine, as kind of shown on this little Google Earth map. Kirkland Lake project itself, I don't have to tell you where Kirkland Lake is. It's a wonderful place. But I do want to take the opportunity to show what some of the benefits of Canadian Malartic is to the local communities here, And when I talk about communities, it encompasses more than just Kirkland Lake itself, which is, Swastika, Kirkland Lake, King Kirkland, and the like, and we recognize all those. But it also the township of Goche, which is locally known as Dobie, and the township of Larder Lake. And of course, there is an influence there with Virginia Town as well. So within just this year in donations alone, we've been making, this is just a list of our current donations. So we're trying to do something with children, Crime Stoppers, some of the ministries. The ones I'm particularly interested in is the local curling club, the minor softball, the soccer teams, and the like. Of course, we've got the festival committee and the like. Over in Dobie, we try to keep up with some of the local activities. So the annual pig roast that they've had, third one coming up this summer. They're working on a multifunctional facility, very similar to the one that you guys out here, not the same scale, but but you guys are leading. That facility that you guys have constructed is fantastic, I have to say. And of course, being an ex-Larder Laker, a resident of Kirkland Lake these days, but still Larder Lake is close to my heart. The Friends of Larder, Canada Day celebrations, and the like. One of the things that's not on here, because we typically do donations as we receive them, and these are the ones that we've done so far. But I'd like to let you know that we are considering doing a donation to the town to support the community center and the like. The earliest that's actually going to be considered within the corporation is within our management committee meeting at the end of July. So there will be no news about it, but I wanted to make sure the council understood that you are not forgotten in this particular aspect. So, and it's just one way of showing our sign of respect and appreciation for the support that I think that we've received from all of you people and your staff. It is, it's a two-way street, and we do appreciate the support that this town gives the mining community, our fraternity, and us as a corporation by itself. Much appreciated. So going forward, again, just a little map to kind of show our small little project, 35 kilometers by 16 kilometers, extending from Swastika into the township of Larder Lake. The next one here, just to kind of show you where we are on our status activity charts. And as you see, we're still at essentially we're still at the starting line. We're still in that kind of what is now termed preliminary mineral exploration. So what does that really mean? It means that we haven't gone and applied to the ministry to have an advanced exploration stage yet. At one time, Queenston, our predecessor company, had gone to advanced exploration, but we as a corporation are not at that stage right now. We're not in mine development or construction. We're not in operations, but we are doing some closure reclamation and monitoring, as we've discussed over the last couple of years, and we'll discuss a little bit later. But these are things that we've inherited essentially from the 20s, in fact. And currently, on those little two buttons on the bottom, I see my staff has made that a little bit grayer. Maybe I find it a little bit harder to read, but we've got 12 employees on site in Dobie itself, in our exploration office. The office here on Prospect, on 36 Prospect, is used, but we don't have anyone that's actually in there day in, day out. So it's just being used as an overflow in a meeting area at the present time. And then, but then we also have a good number of contractors, temporary employees. So typically right now, with some diamond drilling on, there's about 50 people employed directly with Kirkland Lake project itself. So just kind of give you a sense of the numbers that we're talking about. And typically, again, we're doing mineral exploration. And what does that mean? We're still doing some soil sampling and trenching. We've got diamond drilling activities, and I'll talk a little bit about the diamond drilling activities a little bit later on. We have done some aerial surveys, and I appreciate how well everyone responded to being buzzed by that little DC-3, retrofitted DC-3 a year or so ago. That was just a wonderful sight from my perspective, but man. We've been doing geophysical surveys, and so if you, especially last fall and this winter, if you had driven out to Larder Lake, you would have seen there's pickets all over Highway 66. That was me, and our crews. And essentially, that was Canadian Exploration Services and their fine team of geophysical staff that was doing IP surveys along that corridor through there. We've also been working south of Kirkland down on a project that we call the Pawnee. So it's the old Pawnee shaft area. And so from Turtle Lake, Long Lake, and westwards towards the complex. And being a sensitive guy that I am, I'm staying away from those cross-country trails south of Gull Lake. You might see some geologists mapping through there a little bit later on this summer, but we're trying to really, leave it pristine wilderness as we know that it all is, right? And then we've been also carrying out some innocuous line cutting. So again, just a property. So we have one project. We have numerous properties. So about 35 properties, and some of the names are quite familiar. So the Golden Gate, the Crescent, the Sylvanite, the Amalgamated Kirkland. I'll talk about Amalgamated Kirkland later on. In the middle here is Pawnee, where I was talking just south of Kirkland. We haven't really done anything on Bidgood in the last little while. We own Victoria and Victoria Creek, and that was a project that Agnico Eagle a couple of decades ago tried to take into production, as most of you probably remember. And then there's our flagship project, Upper Beaver, just up in the on the corner of McVitie Township and Gautier, and then Upper Canada, and then some of these stars here are where we're actually doing work this year. The yellow dots are areas that we have some indication of good mineralization and resources outlined to date. So a lot of it kind of clusters in that Upper Canada area. And so Victoria, Bidgood, the 180 East, Zone Monroe, Anoki, and McBean, and Upper Beaver are of prime interest to us. But some real big ones that I think are quite interesting are shaping up, but are not to the point where we want to actually crow too much about, is Amalgamated Kirkland, and we've talked about Amalgamated Kirkland every time I've been here. It's just off of Archer Drive. It's turning out to be quite important for us. And then there's the Sylvanite. And so typically at the Sylvanite right now, we've been doing mine rehab. I'd like to, we have some good crazy exploration ideas about the Sylvanite as well. And hopefully in the next short while, geologically speaking, so that might be a couple of years, or maybe a little bit longer. I'd really like to see us do something with investing some good exploration dollars on the Sylvanite and in that area, because we think we may have a good chance to extend that thing in the future, somewhere down the road. So it's something that's on our wish list right now, but it's certainly not something that we're doing right now. We will talk about that area a little bit later on. So our current activities right now, we're focused on Tac, LaBelle, and Gautier townships. And we do have mineral resources outlined on 5 properties, namely Upper Beaver, McBean, Anoki, Bidgood, Upper Canada, and Amalgamated Kirkland. So there is a resource that's been published on Amalgamated Kirkland if you were going to go try and parse through the Agnico Eagle and Yamana books. It's a little bit tough to find, but you know, someone that's a little bit diligent could find those numbers if they so wished. At Amalgamated Kirkland right now, we started diamond drilling there in late January. We've had some really good support from Kirkland Lake staff, and as much as we keep tapping into the water hydrants there, and then we untap, and they've been excellent. I have to say, your staff is always wonderful to work with. We're trying to drill approximately 17 kilometers of diamond drill holes. It's going to be about 18 drill holes. There's presently 2 drill rigs on that project. We'll be demobilizing 1 rig out of there probably by the end of this current rotation. So, and we'll be just leaving one drill there for the next month or so. As we go forward on Upper Beaver, the only work that we're doing on Upper Beaver right now is some peripheral exploration down to the southeast of the known mineralization. We had 1 drill start up there in the month of May. It's going to be finishing up probably early July right now. It's inclement weather conditions have kind of slowed us down. I was hoping to finish this month. We'll go a little bit longer. We're only drilling about 4,000 meters there, about 20 short drill holes. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to illustrate to the corporation that there may be other Upper Beavers in the area. So like we have some very tenuous indications of alteration, and there's some old trenching, but there's areas in there that have never been drill tested even to this very day. So we're kind of breaking new ground, and we've yet to prove or disprove the hypothesis, but this is a scientific method, and so this is pure grassroots exploration. But if it does turn out to be successful, then it's going to be a great story going forward. And then maybe a little bit more contentious of an issue, and this is particularly why I wanted to talk to council, because we're going to want to talk to the people of Kirkland Lake about this. The 1 drill that we have that we'll be demobilizing out of Amalgamated Kirkland, I'd like to bring up to the federal Kirkland area. I'm going to bring in a slightly larger map on the next slide, and so somewhere. We're going to be taking a diamond drilling holiday and let the crews and my staff have a break because they've been going full gun since January. But about mid-July, what I'd like to do is mobilize a drill up to Federal Kirkland and try to drill the extension to Federal Kirkland to depth and just see what happens. It's a limited program, 600 meters, 2 or 3 drill holes. I'd like to do it from one setup. We'd like to minimize the impact on the land, so to speak, and we'd like to minimize the impact on residents. So what we're proposing to do is daytime only. We tap into to the local water supply. We make sure that we get make sure that we know where all the infrastructure is, and we don't do anything silly. And of course, our biggest concern is health and safety to our people, to our crews, and to all the residents in general. And we don't want to be a nuisance to anyone. So we will be coming forward and talking to the residents. We'll have a campaign of probably starting next week of radio and newspaper ads, drilling operations planned. Go talk to the community and the people up there. And also, I'd like, if any of the councillors or the mayor himself has any concerns of what we're doing up there, I'd certainly welcome to hear that. And if there's something that we can do to mitigate anything, or if we not thought of anything that I'd certainly like to hear from. I invite everyone in Kirkland Lake to let me know what we can do to make life easier for everyone. Yes, sir.
Is this something that needs to take place in July? Because that tends to be when people have their windows open.
Right.
And just from a noise perspective, is it something that could be pushed maybe a little further into the fall? Or?
We could push it into the fall. I'd say it's better not to, because we don't want to get into a freeze situation. We could push it. We could push it back to late summer, anyways. The only reason I'm saying July right now, and that's a very good question, is because we have that drill available to go to that site right now. But certainly, it's something we can consider. And if there is a large concern, what we're thinking of doing in terms of noise abatement is we'll take sound measurement readings and erect a sound barrier around it. And what we try to do, and we've tried to think of it in terms of two ways of doing this. And let me just go to the next slide. Number one, the area we're looking at. So this is Wishman. And if you recall, at the end of Wishman, get the mouse to come back and talk to me, please. Just in this area through here, there's a natural little parking lot. So there's the trail that goes up to the north in this little area of park. If we went in there and pushed ourselves and set the rig up on the far east side where it's kind of bushed over and grown over, we were thinking there'd be a screen of trees in there, and we could set up sound barriers especially on the west and south side of that, and try to mitigate that and have the noise pushed out to the slimes. Number one. I also thought about coming up to the north edge of the slimes, and there's the Skidoo Trail up on the north edge, and setting up where historically a number of drill holes have been drilled in the near past. So about 10, 15 years ago, there's a bunch of drilling up there. It's not the opportune location because we're trying to go deep, and we'd be chasing the vein structure itself, and so the angles would be tougher and not as appropriate. But it's an option, and there we would have a full screen of trees in front of us, and so that would also mitigate the noise to the local residents. So we've considered those options, and really, what if we can, I'd like to do it this summer. We can do it in the fall as well. So, I mean, I don't think there's going to be any good time when, to tell you the truth.
Councillor Kiley.
Yeah, right. That area you're talking about at the end of Wishman, there's not much of a parking area there in between where the forest is growing in. You're going to be drilling on the slimes? Is that what you're saying?
No, because we get caught up. We get caught up with a boundary. So our property boundary. Actually, the slimes don't belong to us, and we don't encompass that. That's a competitor who will go nameless. Okay. At the moment. Like I thought about coming in north of that parking area, but there's a whole series of very mature poplars in there, and rather than scarring the land per se, what I'm trying to do right now is I'm proposing to you guys that I'm trying to minimize impact. So yeah, we're trying to not show scars on short-term scars on the land itself. I mean, one of the other options would be to come in at the very end of Wishman in this area right here, right on our boundary, and that might be a possible location as well. But we're certainly a lot closer to some of those residents in there. Yeah. And to tell you the truth, frankly, with infrastructure and everything else, I thought that would be a less palatable solution. So, anyways, as it goes right now, let's call it the beginning of a conversation, and we're not committed to any one particular site. Like I said, there are a number of options, and I'd certainly like to have our people go through and canvass the local residents and see what they say, and we'll see what kind of response we get from the general population as well. You know, at the same time, like, you know. Anyways, let's just leave it at that and see where it leads to. But we'll certainly try our best to mitigate as many measures as we can. After federal. So a little bit outside of your jurisdiction, but Skeed McGregor is a project that we will be doing. This is more in the area south of Dobie and in the Township of Larder Lake area. It's a property that kind of spans and straddles Highway 66 due south of the McBean project, all the way over to the eastern limits of our holdings on the highway over there at Fork Lake. Tentative startup is mid to late summer, possibly early fall. To your point, we can take this AK drill and actually start drilling Skeed in July. I mean, it's an option that we have considered, and if the residents do have any strong objections, I mean, that's what I plan to do. I'll have to jump through some additional First Nations hurdles on that one and finish my consultative process. Prior to starting there, but that's about the only thing that we have to do there. This is a project that it's a contractual project. We have to it's the last year of a work commitment that we're coming into. So we're talking about drilling approximately 3,650 meters, maybe 10 drill holes, maybe less, with one rig. With drill collars still to be finalized and surface rights owners still to be notified. And then in terms of our other, outside of our direct exploration activities, we're still actively engaged with carrying out our environmental and social programs, our historic mine hazards, and our consultation with numerous First Nations. So on the environmental side, we're completing baseline studies. So that's essentially it's a water monitoring. It's an ongoing water monitoring program, and possibly a airborne dust study. So water sampling, also water sampling of some of the historic sites and tailings ponds, monitoring old features, and so we've got a program of inspecting the tailings berms and the McBean pit, for example, carrying out exchanges with our communities. And then when we get down to actually what my staff calls historic mine hazards or concerns, there we're really concentrating on Upper Beaver, Upper Canada, the Sylvanite, and some minor other properties. And these are essentially old abandoned pits and ministry identified hazards, and making sure that fencing is still up to code and the like. And here we continue a program of investigation, and we investigate any new feature that comes to our attention, and we're carrying out a regular set of inspections and rehabilitation. We'll talk about a little bit of rehabilitation that's applicable here to Kirkland Lake. The only other significant rehabilitation program outside of Kirkland Lake scheduled for this year is we'll be grassing the Victoria mine site, the road to the Victoria mine site. That's about the last last thing that we have to do is on our closure plan up there in our obligations. And we'll be carrying out a minor amount of work around the McBean pit. I note also that the town of Kirkland Lake has contacted my office, and you guys are getting ready to haul some clay away to the waste disposal site. And you know, we've got again, just to remind councillors that we have a good working accord there. But I also want to remind council that we still, in terms of the buffer around that site, you guys still, to finish doing that land transfer, we still need to get a survey completed, and that ball is in your court still. And so we can't finalize that transfer until the survey is done. So enough said on that. I won't talk about First Nations consultations, other than the fact that it's ongoing, and it's a significant effort for us. But a lot of our work is still centered on sylvanite, and that was a conversation that began with our predecessor company from the Cisco days. I won't go through the history of sylvanite. You guys can read that at your leisure if you don't remember it. But the concerns that the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines has are, of course, crown pillars and there's long-term stability, old raises, and the condition of shaft caps and old foundations. And you can't read this. There's a bunch of dots in here where some of the Amos sylvanite ministry sites are located. On this last one, just an engineer schematic of what we've been doing in terms of securing crown pillars. For the most part, for example, we've been locating stopes, trying to find the highest points, been backfilling them with sand, not for any terms of long-term stability, but rather that sand backfill is only there to act as a base when we pour a concrete cap on top of that. And it's pouring of that concrete cap at a minimum engineered strength that will actually lend stability to that little thin skin of rock above it on these crown pillars. And so this is to the best of our engineering abilities to accomplish. These are some of the things that we've been doing on Harding Street and across near that Cabo site and the like over the last few years. I will say though that one of the well, and some I'll get back to Harding Street in a bit. I mean, the way we've been doing these crown pillar investigations, first of all, is we're locating them by diamond drilling, and you guys have and your staff has given us excellent support in helping us locate services and the like. And then we've been putting down cameras and basically LiDAR instruments in there and doing cavity surveys. Then we've been backfilling them with sand to get this temporary support and concrete plugs. And so some pictures over the last couple of years of some of the things that we've been doing. We've also been, so for example, out last year, near the hydro installation just off of Government Road on shaft number 2, the engineers deemed that we couldn't just fix that concrete shaft cap because of foundations issues on the Sylvanite number 2 shaft, if I remember correctly. And the solution there was to actually pour a reinforced internal plug with a little cap on top, so you actually see this little T that was formed. But McIntyre was in there, and they rebarred the whole thing. It was just a glorious job. And at the end of the day, when you look at it, you see that there's a sand backfill, and you see a ventilation cap that's poking out of the ground, And as far as we're concerned, there's been some seeding that's gone on there, but we're restoring that site to about as back to nature as we can at the present time. And the last couple of years, we've also been knocking down old foundations and trying to reclaim those areas. And we can get into the philosophy of what some of those old foundations mean, but our mandate right now is to regard some of these old historic infrastructures as potential hazards to the public, and MNDM has instructed us that we have to undertake eliminating these structures to the best of our abilities. So that's what we're doing. And then in terms of what we plan to do this year, the work is actually outlined in these kind of rose-colored stars. So we're going to be investigating the 105-1, 207, and 219 stopes just near the railway track and near where the Sylvanite mill used to be, near 2 Shaft. We'll be looking at, and this star is not quite well located. It's actually closer to where the funeral home is the 105-2 waste pass. And we'll be backfilling that. It will be also going through and topping up any of the shafts that we've backfilled with. So it's an annual sort of exercise that we're going through. So we'll raise the caps. Take a look at how much settling has gone on, top it up if needed, and that kind of mitigation process is going to be an annual thing until everything is stabilized. And then in terms of the work that we did on Harding Street near the East End, last year we talked about a stope that was starts in the middle of the road, and we tried to backfill it. We went through our entire budget for sand backfill, and we're unsuccessful in filling that stope. We tried to plug it using some foam. That did not work. And then we tried to go in there with a sewer camera to see what the heck was going on, and the results were not conclusive. And so, but we haven't been able to remediate it. And so right now, we've given Golder Associates a mandate to re-examine that, take a look at what options we have. And I imagine that once we have that, we'll either have a solution for it, or I'll be back and I'll be talking to you guys about what some of the other options may be. But it's a little bit early to go down that road. But right now we're a little bit baffled by it, but we're not going to give up on this one yet.
Right.
But
is it the one behind Harding? Beside Harding and the rail track?
yes.
That you filled like last year for?
No. Well, we filled last year, but we never found, the sand never came up. Right, so
It just keeps going.
it's where Albert's houses are, right?
Oh, at that end. Okay.
At that end, not the other end. The other end is complete and filled.
Okay.
And, you know, like that one's signed off on, and those reports have been submitted to MNDM.
Okay.
And the one by the old age is complete. That's the one that took out like 100 loads of concrete. So these are not insubstantial, these are significant strains on my exploration budget,
Yeah.
let me say. Yeah, so, but, you know, it's something that needs to be done,
Yeah.
should, you know, and anyway, so there's no recriminations, we just go forward, right? But it's been some interesting challenges. Here, some of these are some of the things that we're trying to do in terms of the monitoring at shaft number 1 and shaft number 3, the drilling investigations that we'll be doing at Stopes 105-2, 207, 219, and the like. There's a statement here on 276-3, the Stope on Harding Avenue. Unsuccessful. We're going to try to, we're just going to evaluate. And this raise 105-2, I think that one's going to be, we're not really sure if we're going to be rehabilitating this one by backfilling the raise or replacing the concrete cap. So that engineering evaluation is still in process, and we may have to drill that one and do a CMS survey on it before we make a decision on it one way or the other. Yeah, so that's it for my for my review for the present time, and I welcome any questions.
I guess one of the questions I'm wondering is doing the drilling out in the federal area.
Mhm.
What duration would that be?
We're-
Would you be there for 6 months, or
No, we're thinking
2 years?
in the line of 2 to 3 weeks.
so it's in
It's
and out?
and that would be 2 to 3 weeks, daytime only. Start at 8, finish at 7, sort of thing.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you, Ray, for again coming to council, updating us on the progress, what's taking place in our area by your company, and you know, certainly Canadian Malartic is a good corporate citizen, and I think you've demonstrated that by the list of different agencies that have received some donations or funding from you to help in their cause. And we want to again thank you for coming to council, and we look forward to hearing from you in the next little bit.
I thank you for your kind words, and I appreciate being so graciously received by council members as well.
Yeah, thank you.
And one little final note, Joanne, if you want, I'll leave this presentation with you so you can have it for your files.
And Ray, we will pass on to our staff your company's thoughts of the way they've been providing service to you, and we'll pass that on to them, of the good service that they've been giving to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And a good day to everyone.
And the same to you, sir. Okay, the next petition, are we doing? Oh, oh, okay. Okay, acceptance of minutes and recommendations.
So it's moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Morgan, that council accepts the minutes of the following meetings. The special meeting of council held June 6, 2017, and the regular meeting of council held June 6, 2017.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, reports of municipal officers and communications. Joanne, you're going to talk on the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
This was a request that came in a little while ago, and I did some research on it, which is why I didn't bring it to you right away. The federal Canadian municipalities, we are a member of them. We do pay annually into their membership. We do pay $1,790 was what 2017 fee was. Part of what they have is a legal defense fund, and they use this fund to work on any legal precedents that really affects all Canadian municipalities, not just one, but anything that would relate to all of them, such as the right-of-ways management, payments in lieu, environmental protection, and other things like that. So they don't deal with just one municipality's legal issue. It's anything that would affect all municipalities. So their fund has now been depleted, and they've sent around a request asking for a voluntary contribution, so much per capita, to put into this fund. So they're asking for 2 cents per capita, which for the town of Kirkland Lake, they're asking for $181. I did do a research of the municipalities in Timiskaming District, and there is nobody in Timiskaming who is a member of FCM, and so none of them have received this request. Timmins I did contact, and yes, they are a member, and they have paid, I believe he said it was about $1,100 that they did pay voluntarily into this fund. So my suggestion to council, or my recommendation, is that if it is your wishes that we do fund it, that it wait until the 2018 budget, and it'll be dealt with by staff at that time.
Yeah, because it's difficult now because it hasn't been budgeted for, and I think, you know, it's certainly something we could consider going forward for 2018. Because what we don't want to be is, we don't want to be a community that doesn't pay our share but receives the benefits. And the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, they, you know, they advocate on our behalf, and they set precedent, and which affects us, sometimes in a very positive way. So, but the timing of this wasn't real good, but certainly we could reply with the consent of council that we would be looking at putting it into our next 2018 budget. But we'll just read the resolution, and we can.
It's moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Morgan, that council defers the voluntary contribution to be considered by staff during the 2018 budget deliberations.
All in favor? Okay. Oh, yes, certainly.
Was this supposed to be a one-time thing, Joanne, or is this going to be an annual thing, or?
At this point in time, it looks like it's just a one-time thing, but I can see that eventually it would turn into.
But we could contribute this year's to in the next year, right? Like, we don't.
Yeah, I don't think they'll
They wouldn't.
turn away money
No.
at
Okay.
any time.
Okay.
So you read it?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, item 6.2 is Ashley is going to come up, and Wilf, and the proposed extension with the TNR for residential recycling curbside collection.
Okay, so this request comes to council just to extend the TNR contract that we have for residential curbside collection. The reason it keeps coming back every year for an extension is because of that Bill 151 that's supposed to be coming into effect at any point. It's just, it keeps getting delayed a little bit longer. And for those who aren't familiar with what Bill 151 is, it basically is reformatting the way that we recycle and trying to put more of that responsibility on the people that actually create the product versus the municipalities. So at this point, just talking to staff at Physical Services, they are recommending that we proceed to go ahead and do a one-year extension and reevaluate again next year. The extension that we did do last year was for 2 years, so by the time we get to spring next year, we'll have to start looking at a more long-term solution. But for the time being, everything's budgeted in to allow for this extension to take place. So there's nothing that's going to come to a surprise come December.
Any questions? Councillor Roman.
You say you've been getting updates on Bill 151. Can you kind of give us the Reader's Digest version
It's
of
very simple.
what we can expect?
There isn't any update. So the update, I went to, there was a teleconference that I was a part of probably about a month or two ago, and they basically said that we're still at the same step. We're not moving ahead. They're trying to get feedback from different stakeholders and municipalities. They're not really making any progress. It's a huge change that they're trying to advocate for. So in order to make that big transition, I think it's going to take longer than what they're planning. But yeah, there hasn't been much of an update for the last year. Not much has changed.
If I could add, you also have, by the time they take it into next year, provincial election.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be that it will be delayed further. So what we're trying to do is just keep it, this contract going, functioning, and working well for the town. We'll keep you apprised of any updates from our side that could affect that.
Thank you. And that'll be coming back in a bylaw. Okay, so item B is the results of a technical study for zoning amendment number 21, parcel of land along Highway 112.
Yes, okay, so we brought we had a public meeting at the last the last council meeting, and the request was to rezone the property from rural to mineral extraction special to allow a pit and quarry to operate with processing material happening on site. There was a $1,700 application fee associated with this, and there will be a $1,500 application fee associated with the site plan control agreement should it be approved. So at the public meeting that was held on June 6th, there was some concerns which were related to an adjacent sensitive land use. And as I had mentioned at that meeting, we looked at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change guidelines, which identified that if they were within 1,000 meters of a sensitive land use, they were declared in a potential influence area, and the due diligence was on the proponent to do a study to determine what that actual influence area was. So they have completed the technical studies. They were provided to us last week. We attempted to hold a planning advisory committee meeting on Thursday. 2 of the 4 members did attend. So we didn't actually have quorum, although we did proceed to speak to the proponent about the application and the results of the technical study. So within that study, it did say that they are fine to operate without any impact on sensitive land uses so long as they maintain a 500-meter distance. The closest that the sensitive land use can be to this property, so let's say Mr. Wallace was to take down the home and build somewhere else on the property, the closest he can get to that use is 700 meters. So it's well within that 500-meter setback. There was other things that were brought up in that report in terms of impacts on the well. There wasn't anything that they could see would be a problem. There were recommendations made that I do fully intend to proceed to include in the site plan control agreement if we do proceed with approving this application. And based on the technical findings from a planning perspective, there's no reason why we shouldn't proceed with approving this application. I do have the proponent here who is hoping to make a delegation to council on the findings of the technical study as well, so I will get them to come up and give you guys a brief presentation on that. Are there questions right now, or would you rather hear from them first?
No, please welcome the...
Okay. So Mr. Rob Peterson is here, and he brought his consultant to speak on the matter.
Okay, great. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Just make sure the lights, is the
Yeah.
light on?
If you don't
Great.
mind, just gonna grab a quick drink.
Right ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Your Worship, councillors, for taking the time to discuss with us tonight our application for rezoning to mineral extraction on our 112 proposed quarry property. I guess I'll start. The last meeting, public meeting, there were many questions, and then I attended the Planning Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday night, and many more questions came up. Welcome any questions related to either the rezoning, or a lot of the questions seem to actually stem more to site plan control, which would be the next phase if this is approved. But since we're here, we certainly welcome all questions. So I guess to start, some of the things brought up at the public meeting, question-wise, included, I guess, where the company was located that was proposing this quarry. You know, would we just kind of pick up and leave after the quarry was exhausted, et cetera? I just want to bring up that this company is owned by Peterson Construction, based out of New Liskeard, Ontario, to answer that question. We're a family company. I'm in the 3rd generation, and we are big supporters, somewhat in Kirkland Lake and big time in New Liskeard area, in Temiskaming Shores area. And as far as Kirkland Lake, my grandfather, I believe, did their first project here, water line to the hospital in the 1971, 1972 area. And I believe that we've done a project maybe every year, 2 max, since that time as a company. We've enjoyed a great relationship with the town of Kirkland Lake and the surrounding communities, and we certainly hope to keep that going in the future. I guess the biggest discussion at the last meeting was about the 1,000-meter buffer zone or potential zone. So this zone is an MOE guideline. It isn't a hard and fast rule. The general basis of this guideline is when you become within that zone, then a study needs to be done. So Ray Jamkesh from DST completed that study, and we can certainly speak to it here today. I guess the biggest result of the study is the buffer zone itself, as Ashley mentioned. If Mr. Wallace was to move his residence to the edge of his property closest to our property, proposed quarry property, it's about 700 meters separation. And in the report, we're more than fine with a 500 meter separation. So I think that's where there's lots of buffer area. When we picked this site, some of the main guidelines with the ministries, MOE, M&R, and MTO, is proximity to market. This quarry is close to major clients of ours, including the town of Kirkland Lake Gold, and also it sits nicely in the middle of Kirkland Lake and Swastika, so we're very close to hauling-wise to all these markets. When we picked the quarry site, a lot of thought was put into it. If you follow the topography, it's on a hillside. As you go around the corner coming towards Kirkland Lake and you pass Murdoch Creek, you come up and up the hill, and then there's basically the hill itself creates a large buffer between our proposed site and the town itself, and that includes the Mr. Wallace, who has submitted a letter of concern. So as you can see, kind of where we have the proposed quarry face on this drawing, it's at the top of a ridge, and over the ridge is actually another hill, and then it's down into the cemetery area and Mr. Wallace's property. So this creates a large natural buffer of both rock and trees. So it's well situated, and the groundwater flow is actually south away from town and from Mr. Wallace's property. So we think it is a good site, and as you can see, based on the pink lines or the purple lines here are buffer zones. So you have Highway 112 here in red. Our entrance would be proposed to be up here, this red line at the top of the screen. We would come down and have a large buffer zone between the highway and the proposed quarry. So visibly, you wouldn't really see very much from the highway unless you're really looking for it. So this is, as site selection goes, it's a pretty nice site. It's buffered well to all surrounding sensitive receptors, and so a lot of the focus previously was on Mr. Wallace's property. We have through Ashley, we have approached Mr. Wallace, and based on timelines and reading the report, he wasn't agreeable to meeting at this time. We welcome that at any time where we are available if he wishes to sit down with us to discuss further. And if we were to move forward, we would certainly do all of our due diligence, well testing, vibration monitoring, sound monitoring with any blasting and operations at the quarry to ensure that everybody is satisfied that we're operating correctly and within the guidelines of MOE, M&R, and the Town of Kirkland Lake bylaws. So another map I'd just like to show you quickly.
Question there, since you have the map.
Yeah.
So people with the truck turning in there, is it pretty safe there? Because there's a bunch of little hills there.
Yeah, I should have brought a photo. There's already an existing MTO entrance at this location, which is why we selected it. It's on a little tiny crest of a hill, and you have great sight lines in both directions. So that's the reason why it's actually further north than the proposed site itself.
Okay, that makes sense.
But I mean, as I kind of mentioned, you can see the topography. We'd kind of come around the ridge from the highway back into the quarry, so that creates a nice natural buffer zone from the highway, and it provides the safest sight lines for truck turning for sure.
Just so I can orient myself, the entrance, is there now where there's some sand piled in front, or is that wouldn't be? So where would the entrance be
I think
from Mr. Wallace's place?
Sorry, where would it be from Mr. Wallace's?
Yeah.
It's about I think it's about a kilometer driving distance on the highway, and then as you can see on the map here, we have 920 meters from the house. So something that when we're blasting as a company, we look at the sensitive receptor as where the resident lives at that time of blasting. So what we have here is 920 meters. Now, 920 meters is to the outer boundary that we're proposing to rezone today. And I don't know that, to be honest with you, that I would ever see the quarry at that stage of operation. It would take an immense amount of projects to get that far. Where we're proposing to start the quarry is actually beyond the 1,000 meter guideline area. But just to kind of not, we don't want to bring it back to council again and again for amendments. We've learned from that in the past. So this is what we're proposing, to have a long life quarry and just a stable source for the local community to produce aggregate. Any other questions?
Robin, yeah, like last week there was a few discussion that you were coming here to take that rocks and bring it down south, but that's not the idea at all. Is to
No.
take this and to work around the region.
Right, yeah, no, this is, the proximity to market is a big deal to a lot of the ministries. You know, the less running of highways, for example, 112 has recently been repaved, so we have a quarry that's north of Englehart on Highway 11, so we would probably service anything south of 112 by that quarry, and then anything Kirkland Lake region would be with this quarry here. Like I said, it's very close to Kirkland Lake Gold. We don't have any contracts with the town of Kirkland Lake or Kirkland Lake Gold at this time, but over the years, we've done many, and it's very well situated for that. No more questions at this time?
I guess the general question with the noise, because I can't imagine what a quarry is going to make when it's out in operation, but where Mr. Wallace's house is situated, is he going to hear anything? That's the, what's he going to hear?
Okay, thank you
Well,
for the
thank you for
opportunity to
coming.
be here. I can answer that question. Having looked at the site, actually it's ideal because the dense tree line between the quarry, the proposed quarry, and the receptor, that sensitive receptor, Mr. Wallace's house, itself is going to filter a lot of the noise induced by the blasting itself. So he can probably hear a rumble, but that's about it. So you will definitely hear it, but it's not to a degree where it even gets to a level of disturbance.
And it's
Based on the
periodic,
model.
I guess. It's periodic as well, right? It's not going to be like fireworks going off here. It's going to be every once
Exactly,
in a while.
exactly. And the blast, I mean, with the technology today, most of the noise is controlled within the blast design by sequencing properly. I don't think there is any reason that Peterson wants to go into more than one hole per a given delay period for other reasons, other beneficial reasons. And that itself will reduce the noise level.
Okay.
So it's not one bang all at once, it's a series of bangs over a short period of time. So
But the blast doesn't reduce the rock to where you're loading it in the truck. What happens after you blast the rock, then you put it through a...
crushing.
So, yeah, so we'd have a crushing operation after blasting. So just to go back a little bit, when we do the blasting operation itself, we hire a company like Ray's or a competitor of his, and they do third-party blast design. So they tell us how much holes we can blast, powder. Then we monitor at the closest houses. We have vibration monitoring and sound monitoring. I think you were saying there's enough.
I think you were referring to the crushing
Yeah.
operation, right?
Yeah,
sorry.
the operation, like, is, because you're going to have to crush that rock,
Yeah.
right?
So, what's
Go
right?
ahead.
So when he does his blast design for us, there is safety built into it. So it's very rare that the limits are exceeded. And if it ever is, that it's everything is redesigned immediately to be back below levels. And it is worth noting when we do blasting projects in town here, we're allowed a vibration of 50 particles
Millimeters per second.
per millimeter per second, and we're talking less than 12 millimeters per second. I think at the 500 meters. Yeah, at the 500 meter mark. So the vibration is quite low. As Ray said, the sound is dissipated. And then to your question about crushing, it's weird how, well, it's not weird. Each crushing unit is monitored or tested by the MOE, and they're given an ECA, giving them a certificate of approval for operation. They vary by equipment, but generally speaking, we would be in there for a week, probably less, on any given blast to process that material. And I have an example here of an ECA of a company that we use. So in the case of this ECA here, the wall itself, by the site selection, we're going to create a natural wall in the quarry face, and then you put your crushing equipment as close as you can to the face, and that makes it basically the wall of rock and the trees above form an acoustical barrier. And so the chart here, it's there's 3 classes. So this would be a class 3 rural, and you have your day, evening, and night crushing limits based on a 10-meter high wall and 10-meter minimum distance or maximum distance from the face. So on the bottom corner here, this would be the crushing limits for noise set out by the MOE for this particular crushing unit. So during the day, the distance recommended would be 350 meters. At night, it would be 630 meters. And it's actually, if you're crushing in town, you can be closer. It's when you're in rural, there's less other background noises, so they take that into account. So we're well within our limits under the MOE if we were to use this crusher. And if we are evaluating other subcontractors to come in and crush, we would have to see their ECA and ensure that it meets any approved zoning by the town.
Okay, so would Mr. Wallace know when you're crushing? Like,
We would-
would he know by the sound, by the noise?
He probably would know because it's noise, but it's at a level. It's at a level which is not any different than if you have constant noise, say highway traffic, or it's at allowable level because it's governed by MOECC. They can't operate unless they stay within those limits, at night or during the day. So it's well governed. Like anything else, like the speed limit on the highway, you stay within the speed limit, it's assumed that you're safe, right? So,
We also discussed on Thursday night at the committee meeting, the night crushing. That's something also that would fall under a site plan agreement or the town of Kirkland Lake bylaws. So it's not something that happens all the time. And like we said, it is for a short period of time if it was to proceed, but we would need approval, written approval from the town of Kirkland Lake to even crush at night. Otherwise, it would be mostly limited to daytime operation.
and if there are issues, because that can be monitored, the noise can be measured, right? At any given distance, any location, and mitigated. Because there are options where you can crush, where you can mitigate that noise. But there would be some level of noise, basically.
I guess I would ask you, would you like to live next to a rock quarry with your
I do.
family? You do?
I
But that's
really
your
do.
rock quarry, or is it yours?
No, I really do. There is a, I live on 900 Corsi Hill in Sudbury, and there is a actually very well-established big quarry. It's called Fisher Ravy, and it's operated by HEA Sand and Gravel. And occasionally they have a blast, and they crush, they drill, it's not an issue as long as they stay within the guidelines and they control they implement control measures. So
Yeah, sure.
So Rob, the crusher would be the same type of crusher that Miller used across the street, or?
Yeah, similar.
So, yeah, because we don't hear that one driving around there, like, it's pretty quiet, really. Not saying when they blast we don't hear it, that we hear, but the crushing itself is,
even crushing, if you wanna hear it, you will hear
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But if it kind of melts into the background noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought you were going to get ice cream for the group.
Sorry, sorry. We were just wondering what that noise was.
So to answer your question, actually, it basically melts into the background noise. It's like wind noise.
Yeah.
You know, if there is a continuous wind, at first you will hear it, but after
And
a
that's-
while,
It
it's at
stops.
levels where it becomes part of the background.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of part of my thing is in that area, there is no background noise now. So he doesn't have that filter. And sometimes when you hear a noise day after day, it doesn't get any louder, but in your brain, it gets a lot louder, and you get more upset. And that's why I'm sort of concerned with noise, of course, because our responsibility is to represent the residents. I think if there was a 30 or 40 home subdivision there, would we be talking about a quarry? I don't know. But there's only one home there, but we still have responsibility to, you know, to advocate
Oh, absolutely.
on
And
part of the person. And,
Your point is well taken.
you know, but on the other hand, we have responsibility to build a community, to build different services. The quarry would be a benefit, no doubt, to some of the people in Kirkland Lake, to our companies. Be a benefit to you, a good, a long-time contractor in our community. So that's where I'm just sort of asking a lot of questions about the
Yeah.
noise.
No, all the questions and concerns are more than fair, and I think the report and just some of the, I guess, general answers that were given, I think they all illustrate that everything does fall within guidelines, rules of the ministries and of the town. And I believe another concern was water by the resident. We are staying above the water table, and I believe Councillor Morgan mentioned it at the last meeting. It is like a rock knob on a hill that we're looking to come through. So we're not going down into the water table, and we would create essentially a flat base as we blast forward to the face. It's not like the old quarries of old where you have a big below water hole in the ground. It's an eyesore at the end and hard to remediate. You'd be left with pretty much just a flat operating surface where if the quarry was exhausted, you could potentially put a business or a laydown area for other operations. So I think from a water perspective, and like as I said earlier, all the surface water flows south pretty drastically. We've done projects in the past to know that with the ONR. So I don't think there's a huge water table concern. I guess as a company, as part of due diligence, we'd be more than happy to pay for extra testing for a water well for Chad Wallace if that's something that he wanted to have done. We do testing beforehand and after operations. And to your comment about constant noise, certainly that'd be understandable. But we're talking about short periods, and if there was a major project in town, like there is now. You know, there's heavy hauling and that, but generally speaking, it's not every day. It's maybe once a year, unless there's special circumstances. So, you know, it might be a week of drilling and blasting and a week of crushing, and then no noise after that.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Just
Councillor Kiley
sorry,
first,
Pat,
sir.
yeah.
Councillor Kiley.
Yeah, Rob, we like to shop local. We promote that. We do have an explosive company in Dane. Was Nordex. It's a newer company from France that has taken them over. But would they be given the opportunity to bid on your explosive products? Or have you used them in the past?
Absolutely. Nordex and one other company are the two Northern Ontario companies that we get prices from for all our projects. So there's certainly, we've done lots of business with them in the past, and we would look to again as Again, its proximity to market is a huge factor, so with them located right here, they can usually supply the best price, and they've been great to deal with in the past, so. no.
Just one other comment. I attended the planning meeting with Councillor Morgan, and unfortunately, this report wasn't ready. I voted against this project originally, but having read the recommendations from Ray's engineering consulting company, I think we've addressed Mr. Wallace's concerns, or he would be here today, that being the case. So I do support this.
Councillor
Yeah,
Shamiard.
Quick question, maybe Ashley could answer too, Rob. Dave Brown lives on the other corner by Swastika. How far is he?
Jeez, I have to.
Behind, that's 2 kilometers.
Oh, 2 kilometers, that
Yeah.
far, eh?
Yeah, and
Because I
it's,
think his land comes all the way to the cemetery almost,
Yeah.
but he's far.
Oh, the cemetery's further north, yeah.
Yeah.
By
Okay.
quite a bit.
sorry, you're talking south, or?
No,
Oh,
west,
Dave Brown's west.
west,
okay.
northwest.
Okay, I know the nearest place I measured is,
I looked with
Okay.
Google Earth, and it has to be further, because the closest residence to be inhabited structure to be considered in the model is Mr. Wallace's.
Mr. Wallace,
So
yeah.
it has to be further.
Yeah, because he's like that corner there.
Yeah.
But sometimes he looks closer or farther. Quite nice.
Because with raw radius.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
circle.
I need to check there.
yeah, and sorry, my comment was the neighbor to the south, the closest neighbor is over 2
Yeah.
kilometers as well. So.
So, oh, yeah, yeah, that would be,
But the way the ground falls, there's a large, like, we're looking at quarrying into this hill. There's also a large hill up here, and then there's towards Swastika, there's pretty high ground.
okay.
And although the general trend of the terrain behind to the south is coming up from Murdoch Creek, even behind where we're proposing our face, you can see a little bit of it here, but there's a bit of a height of land there as well.
Yeah.
So our processing area, once we create it, or if we're approved to create it, would be down in the, it's kind of down in the hole, which
Which is even better, yeah.
is really good.
It'll be basically, the crusher will be basically surrounded with tree lines, massive dense tree lines, and the face
The face.
itself. And the face basically facing south, so the noise propagating towards north will be basically
Zero,
bounced back
yeah.
towards the south, so that's the idea most of the time.
Please continue if,
Not sure if we have too much else.
okay. Oh,
One more thing. Ashley, maybe you can comment on this. Councillor Morgan had brought this up at the planning meeting. Eventually, we might be all in that property across the street from there, but 50 years from now. But if this quarry was decommissioned, you were going to check into, like under the Mining Act, there's a funding for cleanup if the owner doesn't follow through with it. What's the situation with quarries?
So I was able to contact the Minister of Natural Resources, and I had a very good conversation with them on Friday. Basically, they are anticipating that the Aggregate Act will come into play by the end of this year. And when that happens, Mr. Peterson and anybody else who has a quarry in Kirkland Lake will have to start meeting those regulations, the M&R regulations, and get a permit. So they'll get a permit, and then they'll fall underneath their regulations in terms of closing up. And I believe I mentioned at the last meeting that they have a company or a division, I guess, of the M&R called Torque. And so what happens is anybody who has an aggregate pit within an area that's within that Aggregate Act jurisdiction will end up paying royalties to the ministry. I think it ends up, say, 50 cents per ton goes to the ministry, and that money is divided between this TORAC to put towards the closure of aggregate pits, and a portion actually comes back to the municipality. So at the end of every year, I think you see a little bit of money coming in from the aggregate that's blasted from our area. If that doesn't come into play, and I think that was the concern, is if, let's say, the Aggregate Act doesn't come into effect here, what's our responsibility as a municipality to ensure closure? One thing that was discussed at the meeting was what it would cost to do one final blast so that you don't have a cliff like this. It'll end up looking like this so that it's a little bit more safe. So I think you were going to look into that. And then I asked the question, if we were to take money, what would happen if the Aggregate Act came into play? At that point, the MNR said you can reimburse them, or you could actually take the money and forfeit it to Torak, and they would go towards the closure and abandonment of aggregate pits in Ontario. It wouldn't necessarily be specifically for Kirkland Lake, 'cause it goes into a general fund, but those were the options that were available to us.
Yeah, I think the fact that, as Ray said, his grandfather started doing work in Kirkland Lake, and it's a reputable company. I don't think we would have any fears of you just picking up and pulling out, and, you know, that's certainly not a concern of mine, you know, but just from the reputation of the Peterson Construction Company.
Well, appreciate that. A few things we talked about at the meeting and more recently, too, just in that regard. This is more of a site plan control issue than a zoning issue, but I guess we could, like Ashley said, there may be the TORC fund that would be covering something like that. But the biggest upfront cost in creating a quarry is the start process. So if we are ever in a position where it was abandoned, if there's still aggregate required, which there foreseeable future there always will be, I think it would be more of an asset to the town than a concern. I think you could use it for your own resources or sell it to another aggregate company pretty quickly. So I don't think it's a huge I guess liability to the town in that regard. Also, as I mentioned earlier, if it's pretty well developed, you create a large flat surface where right now there is just a huge hillside. So it's a much more developable area for other businesses. So we can certainly we're open to further discussion if we gain your approval here today. We'll have to work out all that for a site plan agreement, but just if that alleviates some of your concerns, we'll leave it at that for now.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, and this will come back in a bylaw shortly, so please make yourself comfortable. Not going to be long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, the next is item 6, item C, request to access 155 Archer Drive.
For about the last 4 or 5 months, Ashley and I have been working with a site selector, and it has come to fruition. They are interested in exploring the feasibility of the site mentioned in the report. As noted in the report, it would be a small distribution center running 24/7, 365. It is a reputable company that is being represented here. It is a project that we have a lot of confidence in, will benefit the community. What we're asking for right now is just an agreement so that their people can come on the site and check it out, make sure that it fits all the requirements.
Councillor Kiley.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, this is the property just on the same side as Roscoe, right next to it, eh?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that'll be coming back as a bylaw?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the introduction, reading, and consideration of bylaws.
So I would move by Councillor Crowley, seconded by Councillor Morgan, with bylaw 17-066, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 16-055, extending the residential curbside recycling collection with Tech Northern Roads to June 2018. Be read a first, second, third time and acted and passed.
All in favor? Carried.
I have, it's moved by Councillor Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that bylaw 17-067, being a bylaw to amend the town zoning bylaw 12-017 for property on the west side of Highway 112 to be rezoned from rural to mineral extraction special, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Carried?
Any against?
Against?
It's moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Morgan, that bylaw 17-068, being a bylaw authorizing mayor and clerk to execute an early access agreement for 155 Archer Drive with 42 Real Estate LLC, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Okay, the next, Tom Gannon from Ross Pope. Tom, you're on the hot seat here, Ross Pope, and you're going to do the 2016 audit findings report. Welcome back again this year, or 2017, 16.
This is something
Oh.
different than your audit findings. No.
Need a microphone, Tom.
Do I?
Whatever you say, but.
Okay, which one?
I can just move this one.
Can you get some signatures for me? Tony, this part of the program is really, we're just going to go over some of the highlights of the financial statement. Part of the auditing process is we are not allowed to give an audit opinion until those charged with governance, in the case of municipalities council, approves the financial statements, okay? So it's
Okay.
the whole idea, and we'll talk about audit findings later on. So right now, I just, you guys, I believe you have received there's two financial statements. The great big 29-page document is the town's consolidated financial statement, and there's a separate financial information package, which is the trust funds that you hold. So and again, they are big documents, and I'm not going to go through them page by page with you, because that's not very productive. So I'll go over some of the highlights. And as you get into the financial statement, I think it's we start at the consolidated statement of financial position, which is the balance sheet. That's like a snapshot in time of what the municipality owned and what you owed on December 31st of 2016, okay?
Sorry, Tom, I did not make copies. I did not make paper copies. Shall I go and make paper copies for council? I had just sent electronic copies out. Did you want them to have?
No,
paper?
that's fine. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights, and they've seen it, they can approve it, and it's, I'm going to talk about it more in Cameron's.
Oh.
But if anybody wants a copy, I have one. I don't need it. So anyways, let's just go through, so, you know, we've done this before. The balance sheet is a, you know, you've got some significant assets and some significant liabilities, and they fluctuate from year to year based on what's going on at the municipality. Again, the cash position is down to $1.3 million from $1.9 million the year before. There's a whole statement of cash flows that shows all the inflows and outflows and how you get to that point. That's not a large amount of money to have on hand. If you look down below, your accounts payable and accrued liabilities are $3.3 million, okay? Those are liabilities that have to be discharged the next month. So, but in fact, some of those relate to the pool, which are funded in a different mechanism than the cash balance in the town. So, the taxes receivable have decreased 17% from previous year, and normally this is a big topic of discussion because the taxes receivable is one of the biggest estimates we make in the audit is what the uncollectible taxes are in the municipality. And as you know, that's a very difficult number to come up with, and we wrestle with it every year. We got certain audit procedures, and we don't always agree with what management thinks. But anyways, the reason the receivable balance has dropped this year is because of the sale of the DVA building, which was on there last year. When it gets sold, it comes off the taxes receivable list, and the amount on the receivable list in excess of your proceeds got expensed as bad taxes, okay? Your tax collections continue to be worrisome, and we'll talk a little more about that later. It's, the increase in accounts payable and accrued liabilities, again, it went from $1.9 million last year to 3.2 million this year, and that's really because the pool was under construction. And just covering, this happens on December 31st, 2016, and again, you're not meeting your pool obligations out of your operations, so it's not that big an issue, okay? The deferred revenue decrease is because of a drawdown related to the redevelopment of Civic. The biggest number on the balance sheet are called tangible capital assets, which are, that's your fixed assets, your roads, water, sewer, buildings, land. Again, they have increased by approximately they increased by $3 million, but that's because you put new assets of $7.2 million in, and you depreciated them by approximately $4 million, okay? And the big ticket items in capital this year were, so he spent $7.2 million. 2.2 million is on Wood Street. The carts, that cart program was 250 grand. Civic was 2.161 million, and the pool was had 1.8 million spent before the end of 2016. Okay, that's just clipping it off at December 31st, 2016. The next statement is the consolidated statement of operations, which would be like your income statement. It's all your revenues in, all your revenues out. So your total revenues were $33 million this year, up from 31 million last year. Tax revenue increased by just over $1 million, or 10% from the previous year. Okay. Your total expenditures came in at 31 million, but this doesn't include that 7 million of spent on capital. Okay, that only includes the 4 million of depreciation or amortization. Leaves you with an annual surplus of $1,234,544. Now, we've had this conversation before that that's not a very good number. That's not how you manage the municipality. Looking at that is not a real surplus. That surplus exists because your accounting policies are prescribed by the Public Sector Accounting Board, and they say if you get a grant, it all goes into income. Okay, so if you get $1 million grant to buy something in capital, and you spend it on capital, and you only get to depreciate 100 grand of it, you've got a $900,000 surplus. It's not really there to spend, okay? Your internal financial statements are prepared on a different basis, whereby we look at the specific funding related to each project, and you have an operating budget, and that's really the surplus that you use to decide in your day-to-day operations. This is for another purpose altogether. So that leaves an accumulated surplus of $101 million, which is detailed on Schedule 1, which is page 21, which you guys don't have. But anyways, the accumulated surplus is broken up into a number of, that's where your reserves and your reserve funds and your unencumbered surplus resides, okay? You had reserves of $1,071,000 this year. Of note, the reserve for working capital is now down to $513,000, which is the lowest it's been since about 2004. And that's an important reserve, because the reserve for working capital is sort of what allows you to not have to go to the bank to borrow every time your cash flow requires. So it's getting down to a low level, and consider getting some more allocated into that reserve. Now, again, there's pages and pages of notes and schedules that are required by your accounting principles. I'm not gonna go through them all unless somebody has some questions about them. The second statement that you need to approve tonight is, it's not really a financial statement. It's called financial information, because the trust funds don't get full financial statements made. They're really, you have 4 trust funds: the library Mayball Bequest Fund, the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, TPR has a trust fund and for the residents, and your employee benefits trust fund. You have to leave some money in the account to pay your employee benefits. You know, one of some of the trust funds have been lent to the town. $84,000 of the trust funds have been, well, more than, I think it started out at $100,000 or more. That's how you built your columbarium. The Cemetery Perpetual Care Trust Funds lent you the money to build the columbarium, okay? And you're paying that back, and that's down to $84,000 now. The TPR residents, the staff has made a real effort to try to get these people to handle their own money to the extent possible, or the families, because it's, you know, it's problematic handling other people's money, and it's down to $19,000 now. It's not. It used to be a big number. It was scary, because you can't really, you know, the internal controls over it are suspect, because some of them have dementia and you can't really determine what would happen to their funds. You can't ask them, that's for sure. Well, you could ask them, but they can't tell you. So we're happy to have that. I'd be happier if the number was gone, but for $19,000 you could live with it if something went wrong.
It's heading in the right direction.
Yes, it's, and again, there were some issues with the Mayball Trust Fund in the past. That's all behind us now. That's been, it's tied up in interest-bearing funds now, and the interest being used to purchase books as it was intended. So I don't want to, if you guys have any questions about the statements, I'll entertain them, but if not, we just need them approved so we can move forward with finalizing the audit.
Yeah, we have a resolution. Joanne's gonna read it.
Okay.
It's moved by Councillor Kiley and seconded by Councillor Morgan. The council was presented with the draft 2016 audited financial statements by Ross Pope and Company LLP at its regular meeting held June 20th, 2017, and that council accepts and approves the consolidated financial statements of the Municipal Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake for the year ended December 31st, 2016, and the trust funds balance sheet and statement of continuity of the Municipal Corporation of the Town of Kirkland Lake and its affiliated boards for the year ended December 31st, 2016, and that council authorizes the treasurer to distribute the audited statements as required by the Municipal Act.
All in favor? Carried.
That's it.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Is there any notices of motion? See none. Confirmation bylaw?
It's moved by Councillor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that bylaw 17-069, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held June 20th, 2017, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Councillors' reports. Okay. Just have one here that I'm sure as you drive through our community, you're noticing all those beautiful flowers out there. Unfortunately, they didn't plant themselves. There was a huge group of volunteers, and I just wanted to make note to and to thank all the volunteers who planted around our town. You know, Pat Gannon, Lucy Beland, Sue Hong, who planted the Splash Park, the Kinross, the Ray Hargraves, and the new Civic Park. Tony Wolf and Bazika Kahalik, who planted in all those beautiful flowers at the cemetery. Shay Cunningham and Shelley Warm, Diane Merrill, Lynn Sauer, and all the other horticultural club ladies who planted all those beautiful flowers downtown in our business section. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our own Joanne Ducharme, who spent 4 long days. Driving through town on, I believe on Sunday, I seen her out there planting in front of one of the boxes. So we want to thank you as well, Joanne. And you know, the flowers look beautiful, and we just wanted to thank the volunteers. The adjournment.
It's moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Councillor Morgan, that council adjourns its regular meeting of June 20th, 2017 to an in-camera meeting to discuss the confidential audit findings report, 2 potential land sale items, 1 tax arrears issue, and 1 personal issue concerning identifiable persons.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.